Democracy news now. And Andy, if you were to run into Democracy in the street and ask how it was doing, it would probably say, "Oh, fine, I'm doing really well, thanks for asking." But if you were then to say, "No, seriously, Democracy, how are you doing?" it would pause for a moment and then it would burst into tears. And you would back away awkwardly saying, "Whoa, sorry I asked. Come on, pull yourself together, Democracy." People start to stare. It can't be that bad. And Democracy would say, "It is. It is that bad. Oh, God, I'm so f***ed." Watching Democracy in every country around the globe at the moment is like watching a game show. You're hoping for the best, but you know the chances are that country's going to be greeted with an sound and a man in a shiny suit saying, "Oh, that's too bad, thanks for trying, better luck again next time." The key problem with democracy in so many countries is money. Really, Notorious B.I.G. said it best, Andy, when he said, "Mo money, mo problems." Of course, Biggie also said there're going to be some slow singing and flower bringing if my Bugle alarm starts ringing. But that doesn't work quite as well as a critique for global democracy. It's still a good point from Biggie. It's just a different point. It's a point about home security and arguably about the limits of some intruder laws.
Well, in Britain we've had a bit of a democracy glitch in which the Conservative Party co-treasurer, Peter Cruddas, had to resign after he was caught by, in an undercover newspaper sting, basically hawking dinner with the Prime Minister and the influence it involves for £250,000 a pop.
Huh.
Now, in his defence, John, that was £250,000 for the dinner, and at these dinners, they do serve unbelievably expensive food, John. I mean, we're talking...
Well, they better had.
You know, we're talking unicorn carpaccio here, John. I mean, that does not come cheap. So,
what does that taste like?
I think it tastes like chicken.
but really expensive, pointy chicken.
That's right.
In the footage, he's heard to say 200 grand to 250 grand is Premier League. What you would get when we talk about your donations, the first thing we'd want to do is get you with the Cameron Osborne dinners. And as you say, Andy, for £250,000, that'd better be one hell of a dinner. You'd better be, if it's not unicorn, you better be eating roast swan that has been wrestled to death in a pit in front of you by the Queen herself. The government quickly hit back, saying the meals in Downing Street had not been provided at taxpayers' expense, and on some occasions, David Cameron had actually cooked for his guests himself. That, Andy, is not acceptable. If I'm donating £250,000, I do not want a world leader cooking for me, or at the very least, it should be a world leader of my choice, and they should be topless. Incidentally, I would pick Canadian President Stephen Harper, and I'd like him to cook a full roast chicken for me in his underpants, and I would like him to be crying the whole time.
Brings back so many memories. Cruddas is an interesting man, John. He's a self-made multimillionaire with an estimated value of over £800 million. And he made his money
sounds
on...
nice.
Yeah, well, he left school with no qualifications, made his money on foreign exchange markets, basically one of Britain's top gamblers. He's a self-made multimillionaire, he's a former tax exile, he's a large-scale philanthropist, and he's a hawker of political influence for cash. He's a man of contradictions, John. He's both the kind of success story the Conservative Party wants to trumpet and the kind of total shyster they are getting slightly embarrassed about.
In the footage, he sold the value of attending this dinner by saying, "You really do pick up a lot of information, and when you see the Prime Minister, you're seeing David Cameron, not the Prime Minister. But within that room, everything's confidential. You can ask him practically any question you want. If you're unhappy about something, we will listen to you and put it to the Policy Committee at number 10. We feed all feedback to the Policy Committee." Now, that does not sound good, Andy. Even if you take that tape and play it backwards, it still sounds bad. And a Tory party spokesman said, after Cruddas eventually quit in disgrace, that he's only been in that position for 3 weeks, but it's clearly gone over the top and well beyond anything that would be tolerable to the party. It appears to be a case of him showing off. That is burying the lead there, Andy. The point is, he was only in the job for 3 weeks? That is a spectacular flame-out. I'm guessing that he spent the first 2.5 weeks brainstorming, what is the most incredible and damaging way that I can lose my job? I could turn up to work naked, covered in a honey swastika, but that'll only really make me look crazy. I need something that brings the entire British electoral system into question. Hold on, I think I've got it. And then he nailed it, Andy. He nailed it like a cocky Korean carpenter. And it gets even worse. The newspaper claims that the offer was made, even though Cruddas knew that the money would come from a fund in Liechtenstein that was not eligible to make donations under UK electoral law. 3 weeks, Andy. 3 weeks into the job, and he can do this kind of damage. This story has caused people in Britain to take a long, hard look at the electoral process before gagging slightly, turning away to catch their breath, turning back, looking at the electoral process, gagging again and saying, "I'm sorry, I just can't do this," and then slowly walking away. Even Conservative donors have threatened to stop writing cheques out of sheer fear of how their donations are now being perceived. One donor said he was adopting a hedgehog approach and stopped giving altogether, saying, "My chequebook has been put away. There is no possibility of privacy." Oh, that's the hedgehog approach? Please. Earn that term. I hope he at least curled up into a ball and then ate a saucer of bread and milk after saying that. Another donor said that businessmen should be praised and not vilified and attacked for donating money to political parties. And you know what, Andy? When you hear it like that, he's right. That's the thing about successful businessmen who spend much of their life in offshore tax havens. The system just doesn't cut them any breaks.
Tory top brass was quick to say that these comments by Crowley were completely unacceptable, and he resigned pretty rapidly. But it turns out, John, this was confirmed apparently on the flagship Today programme on Radio 4 by Francis Maude, the aforementioned Cabinet Office Minister, that on the Conservative websites, they advertised that if you spend £50,000 to join, quote, the leaders group, then you get to have dinner with the Prime Minister. So he was merely just raising the price, John, of the official going rate.
How do you fund elections without leaving politicians too open to corruption? I mean, the short answer is, you don't bother, who gives a shit? That's the almost universal answer to that question. But suppose for a second, hypothetically, that you do give a shit. What then? Because one thing everyone seems to agree on is that campaign finance is f***ed. What people can't agree on is how to un-f*** it. Well, the Committee on Standards in Public Life in the UK published a study last November entitled Ending the Big Donor Culture. With a title like that, it's no wonder that the government had that report proofread first by their shredder. But the committee, under Sir Christopher Kelly, recommended capping any individual donations at £10,000 and in return for that, making up the shortfall with public funding to the tune of 50 pence per voter per year. And all three parties in the UK were reportedly completely against that idea, Andy. I mean, it does seem like a small price to pay for uncorrupting your potentially corrupt officials, but believe me, just if you want to feel better about it, Andy, don't fix the problem. Just use perspective to make you feel better about the scale of the problem that you have. Because these problems pale in comparison to here in the US, where the election this year is predicted to cost in the region of $6 billion. Andy, $6 billion to choose between two people. Does that sound right to anyone? The cost of the US elections has risen steadily, and this is also going to be the first presidential race since the landmark Citizens United Supreme Court ruling, which ended most restrictions on donations by corporations and unions. Basically, it is a financial cluster here, Andy, and it's got so bad that when Obama was overheard talking to Medvedev and saying that they'd have to talk more about the nuclear defence strategy next year because he had an election coming up, so he couldn't do anything this year. He was basically acknowledging that you can't do anything for the last 12 months of any presidential term, meaning he's basically admitting you have 3-year terms now, Andy, because the whole part of your last year is just hemorrhaging money that you've taken from people. It's f***ed, Andy. It's so f***ed.
He was basically saying with those words, what he was essentially saying was, I'm sorry, but democracy just doesn't work. I cannot say what I mean because it is electoral kryptonite. But the Republicans interpreted his comment saying after the election I'll have more flexibility as basically code for Moscow, Moscow, this is the flaming pelican calling. The cat is in the liquidizer. I repeat, the cat is in the liquidizer. Do you read me, Moscow? Do you read me?